it's going to be hard to look at the comments. Wow. I can bring the computer. Can the computer be in the frame a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
It can, right?
Yeah.
And where are the comments going to pop up? The bottom, like once it starts? Can I expand this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's good. Ready? All right. Hi, everyone. Elizabeth Vianna. I'm here at Chimney Rock in the tasting room, all by myself, but I'm accompanied by all of you out there, and this is so cool. And I'm really excited to be trying out this technology to feel more connected to people. I know this has been such a trying time for so many of us. I hope that your families are well and that you're staying hunkered in. And my goal tonight is to provide a little respite for you and a little escapism, if you will. I think wine has this magical way of taking us places. So you're going to travel to Stags Lake District with me today, wherever you are, with these 4 wonderful wines that we're going to taste. And send me some comments. I can't wait to see the feedback. I am used to being a very interactive person, so it's a little tricky talking to a camera. I'm trying to imagine all your faces and smiles, and I'm delighted that you could all join us today. We just finished bottling here at Chimney Rock today, so I've had a little bit of a hairy day, but this is a perfect ending to my day, sharing some wine with you guys. So, tell you a little bit about the wines that we chose today. You all know Chimney Rock is known for Cabernet Sauvignon. Why is that? Because we're in Stags Leap District. Stags Leap District is probably one of the greatest AVAs for Cabernet Sauvignon in the world. We all know this since that little Paris tasting of 1976, right? And so I wanted to introduce you guys to some gems that you don't know about. So not only is this amazing place great for Cab Sauv, but it's great for some of the other Bordeaux varieties like Cabernet Franc and Merlot. So first I want to talk to you a little bit about what I think makes Stags Leap District magical and what makes this great terroir for Bordeaux varieties. So if you were here with me, the backdrop here are the Palisades. We are nestled at the base of the Vaca Mountains at the southern end of Napa Valley. So in this Vaca Mountain, there's this Palisades rocky formations which reflect and capture heat during the day. Really great for ripening tannins. We're at the south end of the valley, so we get these beautiful cooling breezes from San Pablo Bay. And then, in addition, we have perfect, well-drained volcanic soils. So it's sort of the trifecta of great Bordeaux. Cabernet, of course, is the very well-known grape, but today I'm gonna do a little cheer for some of its lesser-known friends, or maybe lesser appreciated friends. And I hope that you love both of these other varieties as much by the end of the tasting. So let's start with our. Here's what I think we should do. If you could reserve questions that are more general for later, let's sort of focus on the 4 wines that we have. We'll taste. We're going to go wine by wine. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what I smell in them, but here's one of my main rules when I taste with people. I am not going to tell you what you smell. You're going to figure out what you smell. We're all plumbed a little bit differently, so don't get frustrated if I use a descriptor and you don't see it. We all see different things, but I think this is your main task today. When you go smell this glass of wine, I want you to really lose yourself in it. really like let yourself be taken in by the aroma. And that's how you find kind of the beauty of wine, right? Let go of what preconceived notions you think you're supposed to be smelling. Really use your imagination, just like you would when you look at a piece of art or you listen to music, okay? So we're going to start with our 2014 Merlot. Now Merlot sort of got a bad rap, right? There's a little movie called Sideways that happened and said Pinot Noir was everything. And Merlot, I think in the 90s, sort of got overproduced a little bit and got a bad reputation. But the fact of the matter is, and this is what I always say about Merlot, Bordeaux would have never become the great wine region that it was without Merlot. In fact, Merlot is the most widely planted grape variety in Bordeaux, which is interesting. Most people don't know that. They think it's Cab Sauv. So what is great about Merlot? Merlot to me, I'll use some funny metaphors today. Merlot to me is like the golden retriever of Bordeaux varieties. It's friendly, it's expressive, it's open, it's lush, it jumps up on you, and it's so easy to like. So that's how I sort of think about Merlot. Now the 14 Merlot that you're going to taste today comes from a blend of 2 blocks on our estate. One is a hillside, it's our North Hill hillside, and then our Pegasus C block, which is at the very south end. So one's valley floor, one's hillside. And there's a great yin and yang I hear because there's some structure, but then there's that beautiful roundness of Merlot. So let's take a moment here. And I mean, it just pops with cherry to me right away. Merlot is very, very fruit forward. It tends to ripen sooner than Cabernet Sauvignon, which is why it's widely planted. So in a tough vintage, Merlot is critical as a blender because even if you have, let's say, early rains and your cab doesn't quite get there, Merlot will come in very handy. So I'm smelling a lot of cherry, some mocha, some clove, and the C block Merlot Pegasus, which is at the very south end, brings in just a hint of herbal. So there's like a little bit of sage, kind of a dried herb component to it. Now, when I made a Merlot, and by the way, we've made Merlot here as a variety since 2002. We don't do it every year. We do it in years that we think it's spectacular. 14 was a drought year here in Napa Valley. And drought years to me are, I nickname them lazy winemaker vintages because Mother Nature basically does for you what we try to do most of the time. So there's less water in the soil, the vines are stressed, berries are small, lots of concentration, lots of depth. So we're actually going to taste quite a few lazy winemaker vintages here today. So 14 is the first one. This obviously has a few years in bottle as well, so it's really starting to get supple and soft, but Merlot is soft to begin with, so. I'm seeing lots of likes. Am I supposed to be seeing comments? Everybody's focused.
There's comments.
See them. Well, I hope you're enjoying that. You can see sort of what I mean by the lushness and the roundness of Merlot. And I love Merlot. I think it is an amazing variety. I think that Cabernet Sauvignon in certain years really needs its help. And I think it can be a standalone wine as well. So typically bigger berries, so sometimes we have to do a little bit of work in the cellar to get that concentration, maybe more pump overs or a little bit longer extraction. But once you get the most that you can out of Merlot, and I think this 14 is a classic example, you can see how this is a great wine. All right, I'm going to move on to the Cab Franc, and can't see them. Are there any questions you want to
Not yet.
Okay. So Cab Franc. Oh, Cab Franc. I am such a lover of Cab Franc. My nickname for the Cab Franc is, it's a bit of a mischievous grape. It's a little rebellious. It's definitely not a crowd pleaser like Merlot is, so definitely not a golden retriever. It's a little bit more austere, a little bit more subtle. It's harder to grow, I would say. Tends to be more sensitive. You need heat and warmth to ripen it. You need to control yield quite a bit. But when it sings, boy, is it amazing. And we have the 15 Cab Franc here. We made a whopping 270 cases of this wine, and 15 was the third of 3 drought years. We had 13, 14, 15 in a row that were drought years. 15 was probably the driest. We finished harvest here at Chimney Rock on September 29th that year, which is an all-time record, early harvest. And the berries were just super tiny, very little rainfall that year, lots of concentration. And in addition, the yields were low. We had rain during the bloom period, and we lost about a third of our crop that year as well. So small crop, and really warm year, but really pure fruit, very intense, lots of concentration, and the Franc just sort of reached new heights to me this vintage. So, by the way, just to give you a little history on the blocks, both of these blocks are actually 25-year-old blocks, so old vines, older vines for sure. So let's smell the Cab Franc 15. And I'm going to remind you, if you have an aversion to Cab Franc or you think that it's not great, I want you to remember this. It is the parent grape of Cabernet Sauvignon. So it was a cross between Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc that created the Cabernet Sauvignon grape, a natural cross that happened in the 17th century sometime. But we only found this information out. Carol Meredith at UC Davis in 1996 discovered that was the case. That Cab Franc is actually an older grape variety than Cabernet Sauvignon and its parent as well. So if you didn't love Cab Franc before, now you're going to love it because it's the parent. It's the baby daddy of Cabernet Sauvignon. So let's talk about Cab Franc. When I said subtle, I think, it has very similar structure to Cabernet. It has tannin. It doesn't quite have the mid-palate of Merlot. But aromatically, what I love about Cabernet Franc is there's definitely fruit, but it has kind of layers. And to me, the thing that's most intriguing about Cab Franc is when it shows floral notes. And this one actually is really showing it. So it's got some violet, and I get a little bit of lavender, more of the black cherry character, whereas I think the Merlot had more of kind of a bright cherry. This is like a black cherry, a little darker, a little bit of mocha, and then there's always to me this little hint of almost like a tobacco leaf kind of aroma. I love it. Now, on the palate, I'm going to tell you, I think the 15 is unusual a little bit. Normally, I think of Cab Franc as being a little too austere almost. But this one, it has richness. It has almost a lushness of a ripe Cabernet. And I think it has to do with vintage. I think this vineyard really performed beautifully this year. So really, really love that wine.
There's a question about the 2014 comparison.
2014 compared to 2015. 2014 was a slightly larger crop and then probably a little bit more rain. So not as early. I find that the 15s are a little bit more elegant, graceful in tannins, a little softer. The 15s, especially when they came out at first, had quite a bit more structure because it was such a tough drought year and berries were so small. So a little bit more tannin. So in general, I would say 15s tend to have a little bit more concentration and purity of fruit. In 14, like a little bit lighter, not light, but lighter, yeah. With that, I also want to point out one more thing. So think about these 4 wines. The first 2 single variety wines that we tasted are like soloists, right? They're just one variety from one block. And now we're going to move into our estate cab. Now our estate cab basically takes our 105 acres of land and creates sort of a symphony of wine, right? This is a blend of multiple blocks, much more complex in some ways. This is very focused, these 2 wines. These are going to bring in lots of different characteristics. And here at Chimney Rock, we have multiple clones and rootstock combinations of Cab. We've got some hillside, we've got some valley floor. The north end of the estate is a little bit warmer, so we get sort of a riper character. The south end is a little cooler as it's closer to the San Pablo Bay. It's about a half mile from north to south on the estate, and we actually see differences between those blocks. So think about all those complex ingredients going into one blend. So we're going to taste the 12 vintage, completely different animal than 14 and 15. So much more of what I consider a normal vintage in Napa. It was like very healthy rainfall. So our average rainfall would be maybe like 26 or 28 inches here in Stag's Leap during the winter. In those drought years, we're probably maybe getting anywhere from 5 to 10 only. So that gives you an idea. So a lot more rainfall in 12, bigger crop for sure. And just normal ripening rates. I remember 14 and 15, we finished, like we were done by Halloween. We're never done by Halloween, but we were in those years. But 12 was much more of a normal vintage. One of the things that I think of immediately when I think about 2012 is just elegance, grace, just super, super pretty wine. So the 12 obviously is an 8-year-old Cabernet. And people ask me this all the time. When should I drink wines? When should I drink my older wines? How long should I age them? And my answer to that is actually it's a very personal thing. It depends on what you like. Wines, when they're very young, show more fruit, more tannin. If you like the sort of subtlety and softness and elegance of age, age them for a little bit. But I think there's sort of a magical balance point somewhere between 8 to 10 years for Cabernet, to me. That's my personal thought. And I think between 8 and 10 years, there's kind of a balance between those components of youth and age that I really love, because this wine is going to be very fruit forward, but it's also going to start to acquire some of those secondary characteristics that you get as well. So let's smell our Cab. Let me see the questions here.
Yeah, and someone asked a question about like the parent of Cabernet Sauvignon involving Cab Franc and
Sauvignon Blanc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, so this is our estate Cab, and I think of this wine also as the ambassador to our property because it is a blend of all of these blocks. This is showing to me what's classic Stag's Leap fruit, which is blackcurrant. A lot of cassis here. More of the blackberry. You saw kind of more cherry tones in the Cab Franc and the Merlot. This to me is real black fruit. Some mocha, some vanilla, some clove. But you're just starting to see some of those kind of secondary aromas, like sort of cigar box, what I call like a Christmas spice. A little bit of mint. There's a little mint there as well. Hannah is my technical assistant today, and I wasn't able to see comments for a while there. There's Sarah Santambrogio. Hi, Sarah. So the beauty of, again, tasting an 8-year-old cab is the structure now is not, it's not massive tannins. This has a long way to go. You could age this wine for another 10 years easily. But it's starting to really soften and show sort of that sort of finesse of Cabernet when it starts to age as well. Definitely get some mint there today. It's funny, I tasted this wine the other day and I didn't see the mint, but there it is. Mocha. Cabernet Sauvignon is the reason I make wine for a living. It's the grape that I fell in love with many years ago, and I knew that this was what I wanted to dedicate my life to. I know that's so weird and nerdy, but I think Cabernet is king for so many reasons, and it's not cliche. It's a grape that can do well in warm climates, cool climates. It's tough. It's thick-skinned. The clusters are loose, so it can withstand a lot of different weather variables. It has the ability to stand time and age for, some of those older Bordeaux can go long time, as do Stag's Leap as well. So I think it's versatile. I think it has, it can tell a lot of different tales, and I think one of the things that we really love to do at Chimney Rock, and I think that's kind of our goal here, it's to tell the story of these vineyards in a particular vintage. So it's really to tell you, 2012, what happened, and when you smell this glass, it is a cooler year. There's that mint. In a warmer year, you might not get as much mint. So really reflecting what happened in nature and translating that to a glass. And I think of a winemaker a lot more as an interpreter than a creator. My goal really is to tell the story of those vines. That's what I'm trying to do. All right, shall we move on to 16? Let's move on to 16. So we threw in, I know we originally shipped a kit with the first 3 wines, but we wanted to do something that's also a current release. For some of you who didn't get the kit and you maybe want to go out to the store and get something, this is probably the vintage that you're going to find out in retail shops the most. So 2016 Estate Cab, much younger baby. 16 is a vintage that was kind of between 14 and 12. So a little bit dry, not a lot of rainfall, and maybe not as warm as 14 and 15. So what I love about, I'm a big fan of vintages that are kind of middle of the road in terms of temp. Not too cold, not too hot, just, and what happens there is you get really even ripening in your grapes. And when things ripen slowly to me and they have time, and I have time to make my picking decisions without being rushed, I feel like that's when we make great wine. Hopefully we make great wine every year, but 16 is one of those vintages. That's my memory of it. It's that I picked every block exactly when I wanted to, and there was time and things were just sort of perfect. So I'm going to smell the 16. Yeah, a little bit of that black fruit, black cherry, cassis. And one of the things I love about Stag's Leap too is these wines are never just pure fruit, and I don't like just pure fruit. I think if you want pure fruit, go eat jam, don't drink wine. Wine it should be multi-layered, it should have other elements, and Cabernet in particular lends itself to some of those beautiful like dried herbs and things that just add layer upon layer, so you can really lose yourself in that glass. A lot of plums here in in the 16 as well. But I get a little bit of that sage, kind of herb de Provence, and it's just a tinge, some vanilla, some mocha as well. Now, structurally, this wine shows that it's still a 16, some tannin. I'm getting a little bit of a chewiness there still. So it's interesting, when you taste some of these older wines, you almost go, well, I could do that without food. They're so soft, they're so supple, I could just drink this by the fireplace. Once you get to the 16, I'm like, okay, what I need something to pair that with. I need something to absorb some of the tannin. But I think it's really beautiful, and I think one of the things that does distinguish Stag's Leap District Cabernets in general is that they are approachable young, but they have the wherewithal to age as well. So let's go back to that 16. Now, you know I'm going to want to hear favorites, right? So you guys are going to have to like send me some comments. Who's fallen in love with Cabernet Franc is what I want to know. And who is going to reconsider Merlot? Are there comments again?
I've had some questions on the vineyards that the cabs have come from and a comparison of the 12 to the 11.
Okay. All right, so what the vineyards that go into the making of the SLD cab, all of them. So if some of you have tried some of our single vineyards like Tomahawk, Ganymede, Clone 7, the Clone 4, a little bit of each of those Cabernet vineyards goes into the making of that wine. Arrowhead, so there's a number of blocks on the property. We've got 26 blocks. And that is a blend of all of those blocks, so there's a little bit of everything there. Comparison of 2011 to 2012, boy, that's a good one. So 2011, I will tell you, until 17, had been the most challenging harvest of my career, I would say. And I like to say that it was a vintage that was what would happen if Napa Valley had Bordeaux weather in a tough year. And that's what we had. We had a lot of rain early, late. It took a lot of work in the vineyard to grow good fruit in 11. It was not a lazy winemaker's vintage. So I always say, if you've tasted a good 11, write down who that is, because it was a challenging vintage. I'm proud of our 11s. We spent a lot of money in the vineyards, I can tell you, to make great wine that vintage. But, and it was, one of the things that was fortunate was we also had rain even at bloom, so when the grapevines were flowering, and that knocked off about a third of our crop. So it was small to begin with, and then it was cold. And I remember, this is a good story, walking vineyards in August and tasting fruit and thinking, this is not going to ripen. What are we going to do? And what we ended up doing was we pulled leaves aggressively in the fruiting zone, literally left them naked, which is always a risk, right? Because then you could get a heat spike. But I thought that was the only opportunity that we would have to ripen that fruit. And I feel like we got pretty good ripeness and good airflow, and we got early rains that year, so there was a risk of rot. So 11 was challenging. So my comparison to 11 and 12 is they're night and day. 12 was a lazy winemaker's vintage. 11 was a hard-working winemaker's vintage. And 12 to me was Mother Nature's way of saying, here you go, here's an easy one. I'll do everything right by you. And it was, the right amount of rainfall, really well-paced harvest, nice crop. But I do love the 11s, and we're going to be tasting an 11 soon, because we're going to be doing Thirsty Thursday tastings for a while. As long as we're in this, we're going to be doing this together. So I'm really looking forward to spending more time tasting. All right. I want to look at some of the Arate 2010. Love the 10. Cool vintage. Ganymede. Yes, who doesn't love Ganymede? Everybody loves Ganymede. How much longer can you cellar the 10 Ganymede and Tomahawk? For a while. that's still a young wine. So, oh, you proposed to your wife at our winery. That's awesome. Who loved the Cab Franc? I still want to hear. Theirs has just got better. That's right, Brad. This is so fun, except I want to be able to look at you guys and read the messages, so I'm going to have to fix that.
Someone asked, what is your favorite single vineyard?
I don't have a favorite single vineyard. You guys know I never... These are my children, these wines. I love every single one of them. Every single one of them has a story and a place. And I think wine, like music, is context. And so, you know, I think my friend Marisa Taylor said this at her talk the other day. It's whatever glass is in front of me. And right now it's these 4 glasses. Mike Madigan, hey! Jerry, you like the Cab Franc. Good. I'm so glad. Texas is in the house. This is fun. I could do this. I could do this a lot. It's such a joy to be able to share the wines with you guys. We just got done with bottling, which is sort of a challenging thing and not my favorite thing, certainly. But I sort of want to raise a glass to you guys. Hang in there. Thank you for joining us today. I also really want to raise a glass to first responders and all the people who are braving the front lines through this thing. It's such an unprecedented experience, and I think that thank goodness for wine, and thank goodness wine is an essential business, and we will be here making wine and making sure that you guys have a little escape occasionally. I know the days are long, and I cannot wait to actually be able to host you here at the winery for a harvest dinner or for a blending party or for something. But I can't thank you enough for joining us today. More questions? Absolutely. Right? Let's do some questions, yeah.
Okay, so there's lots of questions about White Pebble. Has it been replanted, and when will it be available?
Yeah, so White Pebble has been replanted. This is only the 2nd year of fruit that we get, and if you know my standards, White Pebble took 10 years to be good enough to make a single vineyard. So it depends, it just depends. So we're starting to get fruit from it. I'm going to make a little bit of wine from there this year. We'll kind of see how the quality is. If it's good enough, I promise White Pebble will be back. It's definitely one of my favorite sites and names as well. And for those of you who don't know, we make a White Pebble single vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon, which is named in honor of the golf balls that we still find out here, because Chimney Rock, long, many decades ago, was actually a golf course, an 18-hole golf course.
People are asking the difference between how our Merlots age and how the Cabernets age.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely say Merlots, I wouldn't go the 25 to 30 years if you wanted to. I think Merlots have a little bit less tannin. Tannin's kind of the backbone to the wine. So I think they're more kind of 10 to 15 years versus, what Cab can do, which is 25 to 30. Yeah.
And what's your favorite food to pair with some of our wines?
Yeah, so I love, things like Merlot or even our Élevage, which is our proprietary blend. I love dishes that are braised because I love pairings that are kind of similar. So kind of the softness of the Merlot with this buttery sort of, falling off the bone quality to like a short rib or something that's braised. With things like Tomahawk or Ganymede, I love a great ribeye, and if you're vegetarian, you could always go with portobello mushroom, which is fabulous as well. You could grill that.
And tell us a little bit more about how you became a winemaker.
How did I become a winemaker? That is a long, sordid story. So my first love was music. and I thought I was going to be a pianist. And then my second love, I decided I had to change the world, and I was going to be a physician. So I was pre-med in college, and I ended up moving to New York City after college and decided I would spend some time working before I went to med school. And in that period, I fell in love with Cabernet Sauvignon and wine. New York City is a great food and wine town. My heart is with them right now. I lived there for 7 years. And it's funny, it was such a 180. I really thought I knew what I wanted to do, but when I sort of discovered wine and saw sort of the level of how complex it is, you know, the way it's grown, and the idea of taking, I think I've always been a right brain, left brain person, and I love science and art, and that's what kind of grabbed me about wine, that it melded the two things in a beautiful way. There is science, a lot of science in winemaking, but what makes great wine is not science, it's art. So that's how I did it. So anyway, a few years into my New York City life, on a whim, I applied for a graduate degree at UC Davis, and here I am 20-something years later, 25 years later. I don't know, I'm dating myself.
What goes into our Clone 4 wine and our Clone 7 wine?
So those are two single vineyard blocks, right? Single vineyard wines, rather, Cabernets. Clone 4 is the vineyard that's right on the to the north of the driveway when you drive into Chimney Rock, and it's a particular clone of Cabernet. Clone 7 is our cardiac hillside, and it's only that particular clone that goes into that blend. So it's 100% Cab from those two different blocks. One's hillside, one's valley floor. But I'll tell you a little story about Clone 4. Clone 4 is a valley floor block that thinks it's a hillside and behaves like a hillside. So the soils are, you'd think valley floor is deep soils and vigorous, but this has a really shallow hard pan, and the vines stress really early. Clone 4 actually has some of the smallest berries on the property, so love those two wines. They're fantastic.
And how would you describe the difference between Ganymede and Tomahawk?
Ganymede and Tomahawk, they're the yin and yang of our estate, literally. So Ganymede is the very north end, so closer to the Palisades. To me, it's more typically Napa Valley Cab. It's riper, it has a lot of finesse and elegance. Tomahawk's a little rebellious, and Tomahawk is at the very south end of the estate, cooler spot, and definitely shows, I think, it's more rustic, it's more brawny, it's more savory. So they're to me opposites, but beautiful opposites, and they really, in some ways, tell the story of like the diversity of soils and climate that we have within our estate.
And speaking of soils, we've had questions on like the soil types and our sustainable programs here at Chimney Rock.
Yeah, so our two main soils are it's the Hare series and the Sobrante series, and they're mostly loamy soils with some percentage rock. So the closer you get to the hills, the more well-drained and rocky they are. As you come to the valley floor, they become a little bit more alluvial. But we don't have a lot of clay here, so it's mostly bale loam and some rocky soils as well. What was the other question?
Our sustainable program.
Sustainability, yeah. So Chimney Rock's been pretty serious about sustainability for a long time, and we are Napa Green certified both in the vineyards and the winery now for many years. We're solar powered. What I love about the Napa Green program in particular is you don't get certified and you're done. You have to recertify every few years, and you have to show that you've continued to get greener. So we take our sustainability very serious here at Chimney Rock.
Do you have a white wine that you would recommend of our whites?
Oh, yes, many actually. So Élevage Blanc is one of my loves, and at our next Thursday tasting, we're going to taste the 14 Élevage Blanc. So if you haven't tried Élevage Blanc, you should. Our nickname for that wine is the white wine for the red wine drinker, because it has complexity, ageability, and a lot of depth. So I would start there, and then there's a couple of other little secrets that maybe if you come to these tastings often, I'll let you know about. So I think with that, guys, I'm going to call it a night. It has been so cool to be able to connect with people and taste wine, and I hope you were transported here to Stag's Leap District with me. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you here very, very soon. And if not, 2 weeks on Thursday. Cheers.